open borders, shameful abandonment, disregard for human life, the prospect of more mandates and lockdowns, and the list goes on. Now more than ever, we need to stick together. Voting alone is not enough. We must use our dollars to support like-minded companies that fight for our rights and beliefs. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. Last year, we gave more than $500,000 to conservative causes. With your support, we'll give more than $1.5 million this year. It's time to band together and support companies that truly love America and fight for our freedoms. Will you join us?
Local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
Hello, Kentuckiana. You're listening to Kentucky's Voice on 970 AM in the Louisville area. You may also be following us on our live streams, which are on Facebook and on YouTube. If you go to Kentucky's Voice, search for those, and you should be able to find a live stream that will have some video. We also rebroadcast this program if you have Spectrum on Channel 21. Those rebroadcasts usually happen at 12:30, 4 p.m., and 8 p.m., but make sure you check your TV guide to make sure that's right. We also want to pitch all of the other ways that you can reach out to Kentucky's Voice. One of those is if you want to text in your questions or commentary. Today's show is really jam-packed, so it's going to be hard to fit those in, but you can do that, and I promise to read those and try to address those in next week's show if I can't get it this today. You can do that at 502-571-0970, 502-571-0970. Just text in your question. We also want to make a pitch that this is a listener-supported broadcast. As we just went through, we have TV, we have radio, we have podcasting. All of that takes money, and so if you would be willing to give to support conservative talk in the Louisville area, covering state, local, and even some federal news, to basically try to win the war of ideas, we would appreciate your support. You can do that either by texting KY space voice to that text line that we just had. A link will pop up on your phone that you'll be able to click. You can also go to our website, which is kyvoice.org, kyvoice.org. You'll have links to a lot of these means of getting access to our content, but there is also a donate button that will allow you to use your credit card and try to support us, hopefully on an ongoing basis. We try to provide good content, conservative content in Louisville all 5 days of the work week, and every dollar counts in that effort. Okay, today's show is going to be jam-packed. The second half of the show, we're going to have on a state rep that I really appreciate and a big fan of. Her name is Jennifer Decker from Shelby County, Shelbyville area. Before that, we're going to talk about some of the federal races that I consider the most important elections this cycle. Can we hop right into our video with Lee Watts, producer?
Now, let's talk about some other members of Congress in dealing with Kentucky. Of course, Mitch McConnell is retiring, and we've got some people trying to replace him. There was a debate on TV this past week where the top three candidates went at it. These top three candidates in alphabetical order are Andy Barr, Daniel Cameron, and Nate Morris. I want everybody to pay attention to what happened in this debate. In this debate, you saw Andy Barr and Nate Morris really going after each other, sparring. But the third candidate, Daniel Cameron, he was mostly ignored by these guys. He just stayed on point on his talking points, saying his position on the issues. I'd like to remind these three guys of what happened back in the governor's race in 2015. We had three main guys running for governor. Two of them kept attacking each other, but the third guy, which was Matt Bevin, he just stayed on his points, saying why he's the best choice, and ignored trying to attack the other guys. And he wound up winning that race. Okay. This same thing is going to...
Can we pause right there? We'll pick that up after the break. But I think Lee Watts, who's a great friend of the program, he has a YouTube channel called Patriot Point. I recommend that you check that out. He usually does 10 to 15 minute videos on Fridays where he kind of recaps what happened during the week. We'll pick up a little bit more of that after the break. But I do think that he made a very good point. We'll be talking about the closing arguments from all three of the candidates during that U.S. Senate race when we come back after the break. But his point, and I think his summary, were that Barr and Morris really attacked each other for most of the debate. And Daniel Cameron mostly stayed above the fray. Nevertheless, there was a substantive discussion of some of the issues, and so we'll try to address those in the next two segments. We appreciate you coming back. You're on Kentucky's Voice.
Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. You're listening to Dr. Lance Pearson. I'm your special host. We are covering federal elections that I consider the two most important elections in this election cycle. And before the break, you heard the intro of Lee Watts' high-level summary of the first U.S. Senate debate. His basic summary of the first part was that Barr and Morris attacked each other quite a bit. Daniel Cameron mostly stayed above the fray and focused on issues. I don't think that's inaccurate. I think that was a fairly good characterization. He continues on, however, talking about some of the other candidates that weren't at the debate. So can we pick up more or less where we left off?
In this race, if these guys spend their time attacking each other, what you should do is just stay on your point, saying why you are the best candidate, and if not, we may see history repeating itself. Those are the top three candidates that are running to replace Mitch McConnell, but do you realize they are not the only candidates? There are actually 12 candidates in the Republican primary to replace Mitch McConnell, and I'm not spending time talking about the bottom nine. I have several conservative friends across the state who keep saying, hey, support my candidate, talk about my candidate's position. And here's the reason I am not. It's a good, legitimate question, why not? So here's the answer, why not? It really comes down to three things. Number one, voters' time is valuable. I think everybody would agree with that. Number two, voters want to learn about somebody who might actually win this race, and they want to know their positions. I think everybody would agree with that. If you might win, I want to know where you stand on the issues. Number three, you can take the bottom nine candidates out of this 12-person race, put those bottom nine candidates' votes on election night together, and then double that, and they still won't have enough votes to win the election. I'm not saying they're not a good person. I'm not saying they don't have a good position on the issues. What I'm saying is it goes back to my first 2 points. Voters' time is valuable, and they want to know about people who might actually win the election. And if I can combine 9 people's votes they get on election night and double it, and you're still not going to win, then you're not a viable candidate despite how many good positions that you might have, and the voters' time is valuable. People may not like that, but at the end of the night, on election night, you're going to find out everything he said is actually true.
All right. So that was some harsh truths, I would characterize that as, by Lee Watts. Ultimately, however, I do think his assessment of the race is fairly sound. Now, on this program, we've done our best to try to get the most viable candidates on. I have interviewed Daniel Cameron one-on-one, as well as Michael Ferris and Nick Shelley. I consider those probably, I think that the top 5 candidates are going to be, 3 of those will be those two, as well as Barr and Morris. I have reached out repeatedly to the Barr and the Morris campaigns in order to try to get a one-on-one interview. But I told them if I don't hear from them and we aren't able to set something up by the end of March, I don't have an interest in bringing them on. Then they're just using this program to kind of do a Hail Mary if they think they're losing in the race, and I don't want to do that. So I don't have any hard feelings about that, but I've done my best to get all of the viable candidates on, and I do think that it will come down to one of those three: Andy Barr, Daniel Morris, and Daniel Cameron and Nate Morris. So we're going to go through the debate that had all three of those candidates on it. Let me go ahead and just show the closing arguments. There was a lot of back and forth between the different candidates, but at the end there was a 2-minute segment that each could basically tell the audience what are you running on? What do you think that a voter would want to know about you in order to decide to pull the lever for you rather than your opponents? So, producer, could we have the closing remarks for Andy Barr from the first Republican primary Senate debate?
And look, this campaign comes down to a basic question: do we take a chance, or do we nominate a proven conservative winner? I have been with President Trump the whole time, and we flipped a seat in central Kentucky, like I said, a swing district, the only swing district in the state. It was a Democrat-held seat, and I flipped the seat, and I've held it ever since. And when Nancy Pelosi and her allies spent millions of dollars to try to flip it back, President Trump and I won the seat, and we've proven that we can hold it and deliver on this America First agenda ever since. My opponents, in contrast, would risk the seat. Mr. Cameron was nominated, and he was even endorsed by President Trump in the governor's race, and he lost that seat to a Democrat in a state that Mr. Trump won by 30 points. Mr. Morris is even a greater risk because he is running in a statistical tie with Charles Booker right now, the Mamdani of Kentucky, a radical socialist. We cannot afford to lose this seat and deliver a Democrat majority to take down this president's agenda. I served as the chairman of President Trump's campaign in 2024. I was the first member of the delegation to endorse him. I will be his biggest champion in the Senate. I will be a champion for Kentucky in the Senate as well. And don't take my word for it. Take President Trump's word for it when he said that I have been with him all the way and that I am a warrior for his cause. If you nominate me, we will win. You owe it to your philosophy to win. We will win for Kentucky, and we will continue to make America great again. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that was Andy Barr in his own words. Let me just go ahead and go through what his argument was as I see it, basically just summarize it and determine whether or not, how compelling I think an argument that is. I think his argument was threefold in that closing. It was, if you elect him, there is no risk that a Democrat is going to be elected to this seat in the general, and we really need to hold this seat. If you elect the other two guys, then there is a serious risk that they're going to lose in the general. So do I think that's true? I don't actually think that is true. I think no matter which one of these three candidates win in the general election, there is a near certainty, let's say 95% or greater chance that they will win in the general election. Why is that? Well, federal elections are not the same as state, and they're certainly not the same as local elections. The evidence that we can see is that there has not been a Democrat that has won this U.S. Senate seat in the state of Kentucky since 1992, the last Democrat to hold a U.S. Senate seat from the state of Kentucky. This is generally a socially conservative and fiscally populist state, is the way I would summarize it, and national Democrat messaging has been totally at odds with that. They basically are not able to field viable national level, federal level candidates. Now, what's some evidence for that? Well, we have elected a Democrat governor 2 times in the last, 7 years, Andy Beshear. But his father was the governor before him. His father decided to take a shot at that Senate race, and he lost handily. So being popular enough to win governor, which is a very different race than U.S. senator, was not enough for Steve Beshear to really even field a viable candidate. And let me just say the Democrat candidates in this race are nowhere near as attractive to a general population as either of the Beshears. Either of the Beshears have long name recognition. They have at least some segment of Republicans that think of them as reasonable Democrats. The two most likely Democrats to come out of their primary are Charles Booker and Amy McGrath. Both of those candidates are generally inconsistent with the values of Kentucky and just are not compelling national level candidates. In fact, Amy McGrath herself has lost by about 20 points in the U.S. Senate race already. All right. His second point was he is, in his words, a, quote, proven conservative winner and the biggest champion of Trump and a warrior for his cause, and he will continue to do that in the Senate. Is that true? I would say maybe to that one. It's certainly debatable how conservative he is. He certainly has been a consistent vote with the Republican caucus. So whatever House leadership has wanted to get passed, he has voted the way that House leadership has wanted. Now, occasionally House leadership has been in contrast or pushed back on Trump, but that is a rarity. If you vote for Barr, you will get someone that is probably for 2 years out of the 6-year term of this is probably going to vote for whatever President Trump wants them to vote for. All right. So on that level, if that's what you're really enthusiastic about, I feel confident that he's going to vote with whatever the House leadership, the Senate leadership, and/or President Trump think are the Republican priorities. His third, which he didn't clearly make this case, but the third point that he kind of subtly made in his argument was that he is a person that understands the processes of D.C. He's basically an insider in D.C., and so when he moves from the House to the Senate, he's going to be able to get things done, and he knows how to play the game. On that point, I think he does have a good point. He has been in Congress for 7 terms, so almost 14 years. He did lose his first race for Congress. He lost to Ben Chandler, a longtime Democrat. He eventually came back and beat him, and then he's had a couple of close races, but he's maintained his seat for 14 years. He does have extensive connections to what people, our listeners, sometimes would refer to as the deep state of D.C. All of the insiders, a lot of the PACs, a lot of those people basically are very connected to Andy Barr. That has helped his fundraising extensively. He has a lot of PAC donations due to his association with the House Financial Services Committee. And that has basically put him in contact with some of the most wealthy donors in Republican politics. He has been a person that can get things done for the big banks and the big insurance companies, and they have repaid that quite extensively with donations to his campaign so far. I believe to the tune of $5 or $6 million so far, as PAC contributions or contributions from members of the banking, insurance, things that are regulated by the House Financial Services. After the break, we'll see clips from Nate Morris and also from Daniel Cameron. Join us on Kentucky's Voice.
to Kentucky's Voice Radio online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson, with the Kentucky Liberty Caucus as well as the Louisville Tea Party. Before the break, we heard from the last 2-minute closing arguments from the first Republican primary U.S. Senate debate from Andy Barr, and we kind of assessed whether or not his case was compelling or even true. Next, we're going to go to Nate Morris. Nate Morris.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be with you tonight, to be on stage with these folks. And I think the fault lines in this race are really clear. We've got two career politicians that are in this race. Folks, they're in it for the title, they're in it for the prestige, they're in it because they need a job, they need the paycheck. And these are the same failed career politicians we've been sending for so long to Washington. President Trump showed us that we need outsiders, we need business people, we need people that are willing to take on the swamp with everything that they've got. That's why I'm in this race, that's why I'm running, that's why I'm here to fight. Folks, we got so many issues that are animating our country right now. One of the biggest ones is term limits. We've got to have term limits. The guys on this stage would never agree to that. I said I'm going to serve 2 terms, serve my time, serve you, and come home. We also have to make sure that gun control is not shoved down our throat by weak so-called Republicans. The Constitution's very clear. Shall not be infringed means shall not be infringed. Folks, we all see the economic damage of trade policy by career politicians right here in Kentucky. It was people like my family that got hurt by NAFTA, that saw their job go overseas. That's why President Trump's tariffs are a great thing for our economy. They're a great thing for our country. They're leveling the playing field and stopping these foreign countries from ripping us off. Finally, folks, we got to take care of our own. We should not give a cent to an illegal immigrant. And we have to make sure every one of these illegals that invaded us under Joe Biden, they go back where they came from. So tonight, I'm asking you, join Elon Musk, join Charlie Kirk, join the MAGA movement. And together, I know we can put Kentucky first again, we can put America first, and we can send an outsider and be a clean break from the last 40 years of what we've had of failed leadership. I ask you for your vote. Thank you so much, and good evening.
All right. So that was Nate Morris's closing argument. So we'll go through that. As far as I can summarize it, I think he basically has 3 points as well. The first is that he is a businessman. It's debatable how successful a businessman, but he is not a career politician. He will support term limits, and he is an outsider and a fighter, somewhat in the mold of Donald Trump. His second argument, so let's go ahead and address that. The question with Nate Morris's campaign is he has never run for elected office, so we don't actually know what his track record would be in terms of public service. He did start a business that he made a significant amount of money from, and a lot of the criticism of his campaign that has mostly come from PACs associated with Andy Barr. When you see all the ads on TV of people attacking Nate Morris, those are coming from PACs affiliated with Andy Barr. When you see people running ads on TV that are attacking Andy Barr, those are mostly from PACs associated with Nate Morris. So that has been a theme throughout. I do buy that he is an outsider for the most part. I do buy that he is a fighter. He's been very aggressive in attacking people that are even vaguely associated with Mitch McConnell. Okay, so now, as far as is he going to support term limits, I don't know. I've seen a lot of politicians that have said they're going to be out in 1 or 2 terms, and then they're still around. The reality is that is not the law. It isn't even clear to me that having politicians be term limited results in them being more conservative. In general, some of the worst politicians you can find is someone who isn't running again, and therefore they'll vote any way that they want with no accountability to the voters. And so that isn't necessarily even attractive to me. All right. His second is that he is going to back Trump again, at least for the first 2 years of his term. This is a 6-year position. Trump will not be the president in a little over 2.5 years. So I have no doubt that he is going to support and be very vocal in support of whatever it is that Trump is arguing for or wanting to do. I don't know how that translates to the 4 years of his term that will be post-Trump. All right. The third point that he makes is that some national figures that are generally vocally MAGA, pro-Trump, etc., have supported him. So he hasn't had a lot of endorsements, and we'll get into endorsements in a little bit, how little value I have for those. But people like Charlie Kirk, Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, CPAC, I guess, just very recently decided that they were going to endorse him. The only Kentucky politician that holds water for me at all that has come out to back him has been John Hodson. He's been an emissary. I guess Nate Morris grew up in his district. So if you really buy into some other person telling you that they like the person, that's why you're going to vote for them, then some of those national figures have backed his campaign. Okay. Now, the last candidate, in short, I don't really know. There isn't a lot of track record behind Nate Morris to determine whether or not he's telling the truth that he's going to do this or that. He does seem in his campaign messaging, which has been consistent, that he does not like McConnell, that he is going to be aggressively anti-immigration, and that he is pro-tariff. So those are his positions. He's been very consistent about those, so I wouldn't be shocked if he did follow through on supporting those three things. All right, the last candidate. Can we run the clips for Daniel Cameron?
Cameron, your final thoughts?
Well, look, it has been an honor to be here tonight amongst these gentlemen. What I think you saw tonight was a display of two candidates, Congressman Barr and Mr. Morris, who were attacking each other and more focused on personal grievances as opposed to what you care about. You care about your kids and your grandkids. You care about ensuring that they have every opportunity to be the best and brightest version of themselves. That's what I am focused on in this campaign. How do we put more money in your pocket? How do we make sure that when it comes to the challenges that exist, whether it is Iran or more closely at home, ensuring that folks have jobs and resources to get from A to B when traveling across this state? I want to focus on those things because that is what you care about. When I was your Attorney General, I stood firmly behind you. I stood firmly for your constitutional rights and our common sense values. And whether it was having protesters on our front lawn and having them yell, "Burn our house down," I did the courageous thing and stood up for our law enforcement community. That's why I'm so proud to have so many law enforcement officials who have endorsed this campaign, over 100 of them. It's why I feel very strongly that when it comes to the drug epidemic and a porous southern border and securing that border, I understand it because I sued the Biden administration. I saw the pain that was occurring here in the state, and I did something to address it and brought nearly $900 million into the state to do so. I am focused on you. It'd be an honor to serve your interests and your values in Washington and serve the people of Kentucky as opposed to the millionaires and billionaires that have bought my two other compadres in this race. I'd be grateful for your help. God bless you. God bless the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron.
All right. That was Daniel Cameron, the third of the candidates. So what were the messages of his closing argument from the first debate? Well, I think the first one is that he is not getting involved in mudslinging. He is going to be focused on the cares of the average Kentuckian. So that certainly is the way that he's conducted his campaign so far. Now, a lot of that is that the other two candidates, for whatever reason, have chosen not to attack him at all. So he hasn't had to sling mud. He's been able to focus on his message. The second point that he has made is that he has actually served for 4 years. That doesn't necessarily make him a career politician, but he was the Kentucky Attorney General. He won a statewide race, and then he stood up when it was not always easy to do it for conservative values. Specifically during the Breonna Taylor DEI protests, he had protesters on his lawn threatening to burn down his house, and he didn't back down in that case. All right. So as far as those 2 points and as far as that goes, I do think that both of those things are pretty valid. We'll talk just briefly after the break about some of the criticisms that he's faced and whether he matches up on those. Okay.
Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson with the Kentucky Liberty Caucus and the Louisville Tea Party. For most of the show, we've been talking about the Kentucky Republican primary Senate race. We have gone through video of Andy Barr, as well as Nate Morris. We saw and had some brief commentary about Daniel Cameron as well. Lance Pearson with the Kentucky Liberty Caucus and the Louisville Tea Party. For most of the show, we're trying to work out some audio issues with our guest, Jennifer Decker. Okay. All right. And so Daniel Cameron, we went through his basic pitch. His basic pitch was that he has stayed out of the negative politics. He's focused on the issues that Kentuckians care about. The other thing is that he has a proven track record in which he has fought for conservative values even when it was very difficult, especially in defending law enforcement, the Breonna Taylor incident being one example, but also fighting for the opioid abatement funds, et cetera, when he was the Attorney General. The third point that he made was that he has not bought off by special interests. That includes not taking a bunch of money from millionaires and billionaires, as he says the other candidates have done, and that is partially a way to inoculate him from the biggest criticism so far of his campaign, and that is that he has not fundraised quite to the level that either of the other two have. I believe in their stored up campaign coffers, Andy Barr has somewhere around $10 million. And Nate Morris got $10 million in the super PAC from Elon Musk and has put somewhere on the order of $4 million of his own money into his campaign. Daniel Cameron, I believe, has fundraised more in the range of $1.5 to $2 million. He has, and we'll see, this is actually one of the last 2 days of the funding period. We'll find out sometime around April 15th how much fundraising has gone into this. All right. So I do want to say basically, I think that part of Daniel Cameron's argument was that the fundraising isn't an issue because he is only focused on working Kentuckians who don't have the millionaires and billionaires' money. So partly that is a cope that explains why he hasn't raised as much. But it has also been the focus of his campaign, which has been very, I believe that one of the journalists in Kentucky said that it was one of the most faith-focused campaigns that has ever been run at a federal level in Kentucky. And that is true. He has mentioned his faith, and I have no reason to doubt that. I do know some of the people in Cameron orbit, including his wife and his brother, his father and mother-in-law. They are also fairly devout religious people. I know that he attends church regularly, and so that is appealing to a lot of Kentuckians. Okay, producer, have we sorted out the audio issues with Jennifer? Okay, all right. I will discuss at the very end of our show how you can donate to some of these candidates. Also to another race, the Thomas Massey versus Ed Gowrine versus Nicole, whatever her name is. There's actually a third Republican in that race. But we're going to go ahead and jump over to a state rep, Jennifer Decker, who represents, I believe it's House District 58, but she's from Shelby County. I think she lives in Shelbyville and is a very effective legislator. We're glad to have her on. Jennifer, are you there? Okay, maybe we're still sorting that out. So let me go ahead and focus a little bit on that other race, that Thomas Massey, Ed Gowrine race. Today and tomorrow, there is a Thomas Massey money bomb is what they call it. It's basically an online fundraising event in which some prominent figures that are backing the campaign and Thomas Massey himself will get online and try to appeal for especially small money donors to try to give to his campaign. If you are interested in going to that, if we could put up that graphic of the Thomas Massey money bomb, if you are watching online, you'll be able to see it. But if you want to go to this, it's just Massey, M-A-S-S-I-E, money, M-O-N-E-Y, bomb, B-O-M-B.com. I believe at 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. tonight, there will be some more or less constitutional conservative celebrities, if you want to call that. Probably, and I haven't heard the specifics of who's going to be on. I wouldn't be surprised if someone like Rand Paul or Ron Paul were on in support of that. And just basically, it's a fundraising event to try to help him counter the large financing from multi-billionaire out-of-state donors that Ed Gowrine has managed to finagle into his campaign. And so go to MasseyMoneyBomb.com, especially at 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. tonight, where there will be a live event, and you will hear from Thomas Massey on that. The other fundraising event that I want to mention, or the other fundraising, this, as I mentioned, the last 2 days of this month will be on the first quarter financial reporting for the U.S. Senate race. And so if you want to give to one of those Senate candidates, and in particular, I will say, this past week, I put in my information for my tax return to just find out how much I'm going to get back of my own money from the federal government. And I believe it's going to be in excess of $1,000 this year, maybe even $1,500. I haven't officially filed my taxes quite yet. Remember, April 15th is the deadline for tax filing. However, I have decided that in hopes of boosting a candidate who is at least addressing the needs of the everyday Kentucky voter, and who has so far had a little bit of trouble fundraising, and I would rather that this candidate not have to resort to getting money from millionaires and billionaires in order to run a viable campaign. I am going to be giving over $1,000 this election cycle. Tonight, in fact, I'm going to give $1,000 to the Daniel Cameron campaign. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to vote for Daniel Cameron. I have on occasion given money to campaigns and then I voted for someone else, especially if late in the campaign they go back on their campaign promises or they totally change the focus. I just chalk it up to that was a hope that didn't get fulfilled. So this isn't what I would call an endorsement. Whatever. If you want to call it an endorsement, I'm basically opening my wallet and giving $1,000 today to Daniel Cameron and his campaign. If you also want to do that, figure out how much money you're going to have in tax refunds this tax season, and you want to give to that campaign, you can go to Cameron, K-A-M, I'm sorry, not K, C-A-M-E-R-O-N, for F-O-R, Kentucky. Obviously, KENTUCKY.com. If you go online, there'll be a button up in the top right that says either buy some products from the store or donate, and you can give directly to that. Now, unfortunately, the Cameron campaign uses WinRed. I think the other two candidates do also. So I would advise you when you're giving money, don't enter an email address that you don't want a lot of spam from. So I have some secondary email addresses that I will enter for that. You obviously have to enter your real credit card number in order to give donations. But do that and you will avoid a lot of the spam emails and spam calls that you tend to get from the National Republican Party, which harvests all the information when you give through WinRed. If you give to the Massey Money Bomb, that's usually handled through a different platform, not WinRed, and I don't get a lot of spam. I've given to his campaign in the past, and so you can feel assured of that. So MasseyMoneyBomb.com and Cameron for Kentucky, spell all of that out, .com. Again, I will be giving $1,000 to the Cameron campaign so that he doesn't have to resort to taking a lot of big money from special interest groups. And when I hear people at the grassroots level, can you repeat that, producer? Okay. When you hear criticisms of a lot of candidates at the grassroots level, their biggest criticism is they don't care about regular people. They only really care about the people that are huge donors to their campaign or people who are special interest groups, like they represent a particular industry. If you do not like that, one way that people try to fight back about that is they will throw their vote away by voting for someone that has no chance to win. And the thought is that by voting to somebody who's going to get 1 or 2% of the vote, that they will send a message that this 1 to 2% of a vote in a primary election is from people who don't like some of the people that were put up for this election. I would say that nobody that has any actual power cares about that. That is whatever message you think you're sending, it is a message that is not reaching any audience that is worthwhile in reaching. They don't change who they're going to put forward. If you don't like those candidates, if you don't give to one of the candidates that actually has a viable chance of winning, they just write off that 2 to 3% of the vote and don't even worry about it anymore. So my suggestion to people that are concerned about all of the billionaires and the millionaires who are giving money to buy elections is get behind a candidate who isn't bought off by all of those, who isn't getting all of their fundraising from that, and provide the funding yourself. Small dollar donors packaged together are able to counteract the influence of those special interests, of those big money donors, and all of those big money donors and special interests can be counteracted by a bunch of people giving $20, $50, $80. And if you do happen to have a lot of money, maybe you're retired and whatever, the people that you thought might get your inheritance have really irritated you during this calendar season, you can give up to $3,500 now, compared to a $10 million donation from, for example, Elon Musk. I think $10 million works out to almost $3,500 donations from individual donors. So the end message that I would have is for the person that wants to influence politics for people like them, the welder, the farmer, the law enforcement officer, get behind a candidate who isn't obviously bought off by those people and try to have them have loyalty to you as a small donor. Ugh.
kyvoice.org.
Okay, welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson with the Kentucky Liberty Caucus and the Louisville Tea Party. We continue to have some technical issues getting Jennifer Decker on. If we can get her on for a little bit of this last section, we will. Instead, we're going to talk a little bit more about these two elections. In particular, let me talk a little bit about the Kentucky House 4. Why am I such a passionate supporter of Thomas Massie, and why will I be going to MassieMoneyBomb.com in the next 2 days, but especially between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. tonight, in order to donate to his campaign? Well, imagine that there was a politician out there who actually does what he says. When he campaigns, he tells you what he's going to do. He gets up to Washington, and no matter how much money or how much influence gets thrown at him, he continues to do exactly what he said he was going to do. He doesn't bend to the political wind. He doesn't trade his principles in for power. He just walks into Congress every single day. Even if every other person in the chamber is against him on a vote, he's willing to take that vote for what he thinks is right. He basically asks every single day, do I want the government to be smaller and less involved in my life, or do I want the government to be bigger and more involved in my life? Do I want to pass on $108,000 worth of debt for every single citizen of the United States, which is where we currently are, and that is continuing to explode? Or do I actually want to take a hard vote where sometimes I have to contradict House leadership or Senate leadership, or yes, sometimes even the president, in order to say the spending has got to stop and we cannot continue running up our grandchildren's credit cards in order to bolster whatever it is, welfare programs or warfare programs. Those are the two sides of the aisle, and where all of the money that we do not have goes onto our grandchildren's credit cards. Now, there's criticism that Thomas Massie is a career politician. First of all, Thomas Massie is a millionaire. He was an MIT graduate. He started a virtual reality artificial intelligence company right out of college. He wound up employing, I believe, 29 people He filed 29 patents as an engineer, designing basically extremely technical artificial intelligence related software, but he didn't want to raise his kids in Boston, Massachusetts. And so he decided that he was going to move back to Appalachia to Lewis County, and he was going to start a family with his high school sweetheart who also went to MIT with him. All right. After he came back, he had multiple kids. He decided that he was going to try to deal with a local zoning issue and ultimately fighting back. And we're going through a lot of that with these data centers right now. He fought a local zoning issue. He ultimately was able to beat back some zoning regulations, but he decided I've got to actually get involved. And so he ran for judge executive. That's kind of like the Louisville mayor, but for the counties around the state. He won that office, and then ultimately he got into Congress in 2012. So for the last 14 years, he's been consistent. He hasn't been bought off. And if I can make a very simple pitch, it's Thomas Massie is not for sale. Now, he does need money. In this current election cycle, there are billionaires that are from New York City, Palm Beach, Florida, and Las Vegas, Nevada that have put in over $6 or $7 million. There is also a couple of coalitions that have decided to start donating against him to try to get him out. They basically don't like someone voting not in lockstep with whatever the party establishment wants them to vote with. And they think by putting enough money into this election that they're going to be able to take out an independent voice, someone that actually votes for what the voters elected him to do. He hasn't contradicted what he told everyone he was going to do when he got into office. And so he does need small money donors. And so I believe that he has over 1,000 Kentucky donors to his campaign. His opponent, I believe, has less than 50. So if there's any question of who is running an authentically Kentucky campaign, it's Thomas Massie. All right. Now, if we could put up the image of his lifetime scores from conservative organizations, there's a lot of criticism. Thomas Massie contradicts occasionally the party line or sometimes even Donald Trump, and therefore he's not a real Republican, he's not a conservative, or he's really a Democrat. Now, the reality is that is not his voting record. He does vote. He has voted with Donald Trump over 90% of the time. There's just been a couple of public disagreements. And so on those public disagreements, like spending $2 trillion on the CARES Act in order to just rack up all kinds of debt and fight and support all of the crazy COVID programs that got instituted, Thomas Massie was the one vote against that. All right, so that got him in the ire. But if we could put up the graphic of his lifetime scorecards from various conservative organizations, okay, the American Conservative Union, the Gun Owners of America, the National Taxpayers Union, the Club for Growth, basically every single independent conservative organization has a lifetime voting record score for Thomas Massie above 90%, and a couple of cases 100%. So basically nobody in the House, and arguably maybe Rand Paul, but nobody else in the Senate has been willing to take hard votes for conservative principles and have a lifetime score anywhere near 100%. Now, he's also drawn some ire because he did not support some of the speaker votes. He got betrayed by Mike Johnson on a vote and therefore told Mike Johnson that he was not going to support his reelection as House Speaker. Now, if you follow Fox News a lot, I don't know how anybody could be in support of Mike Johnson. He has not been a good speaker. Nevertheless, he also opposed some omnibus spending bills that were passed under Republican Speaker of the House Boehner, also Paul Ryan. I actually can remember long enough when people that Paul Ryan supported were considered rhinos or not legitimately conservative Republicans. Now, Massie gets criticized for opposing some of the spending programs from Paul Ryan. All right. He also voted to fund the border wall. He voted for the SAVE Act in order to make sure that only citizens are voting. You see a lot of misinformation online about these issues. He's consistently voted for more border wall funding. The only times that he has voted against that is when he was voting against an omnibus spending bill where it was slipped in as one line as part of like a $1.5 trillion spending bill. And so then they take the one line in the bill that people are going to get irritated about, $1,000 in order to provide puppies to grandmas will be slipped into these gigantic spending bills. Then he votes for it, and now Thomas Massie doesn't like puppies and he doesn't like grandmas. So these are just silly political games that get played all the time. Whenever somebody actually is a legitimate conservative willing to buck the system and actually fight for our future, they get criticized from the opposite side. Okay, now, how about some of these issues that the 4th District should really care about? Currently, there is a bill in Congress called the Farm Bill. These come out usually not more than every 5 years. Sometimes the Farm Bill can take more than 5 years. Sometimes it's an 8-year Farm Bill. Thomas Massie has long supported something called the Prime Act. The Prime Act basically says as long as you are not shipping meat across state lines, which is when the federal government usually is allowed to intervene into local commerce, then you can have a small local butcher process meat without having an FDA inspector on site. It's almost impossible to run a small independent meat packer or a butcher without having an FDA inspector on site at all times. So it basically only allows the four companies that control a meat packing cartel. It basically provides a monopoly / cartel for those 4 companies. If we had more competition and you were able to go locally and get a cow butchered into reasonable, if I want to sell my neighbor a steak, I should be able to take it to a local butcher, have them butcher that, and sell that steak directly to my neighbor. Maybe the local health department should have supervision over it, but I certainly don't need an FDA inspector to have a full-time job that's paid for by my small local butcher. And so Thomas Massie has gotten a pilot program into the current Farm Bill that is working its way through Congress. If he's able to get that, fantastic. I also am old enough to remember when basically the entire Trump administration supported the release of all of the Epstein files. Then after Trump got into office and he realized some of the people that are actually his cabinet secretaries or his trusted advisors had extensive connections to Jeffrey Epstein, that tune changed, but Thomas Massie did not change. Thomas Massie demanded that we have transparency over those issues, and he was willing, along with only 3 other members of the House on the Republican side, to force a vote in order to have the release of some of those Epstein files. We've seen heads of state, we've seen royalty in other countries due to the release of those Epstein files basically be disgraced, placed in prison, and had their royal titles stripped just from the action of that amount of courage. Eventually, almost the entire Republican caucus and President Trump wound up signing that bill. But it took one person with courage in order to buck what everyone else that basically to keep to the priorities that were set before the beginning of this administration and not bend to the will of just the loudest voice in the room. All right. Now, I just want to say, if you want to give to that campaign, you can go to MassieMoneyBomb.com. There will be a live segment to that on that, and you will see discussions probably with Rand and Ron Paul, as well as Thomas Massie as well himself speaking. Any amount helps. $20, $5, $100, up to $3,500 for this primary election. I want to close today's show by again reiterating that I myself will also be giving $1,000 to the Daniel Cameron campaign in the next 2 days so that it makes it onto the first quarter financial report. If any of our listeners are willing to also do that, maybe give $20, give $3,500 to that effort in order so we have one candidate on the primary ballot that isn't getting most of their funding from giant banks, from insurance companies, from billionaires, just regular people donating to his campaign. Go to CameronForKentucky.com.